Hello, and welcome to the Stateside Madness podcast, the one and only podcast of the official American Madness fan service. I'm Laurie, along with my co-host Poly, here to bring you news, reviews, and deep dives into the nutty sound of the British pop band Madness. Hi, welcome to Stateside Madness. This is our first podcast. My name's Laurie.
And I am Poly.
All right, so I think we should start off by talking a little bit about ourselves. So, Poly, how did you get into Madness? How did you become a fan?
Some time ago, I suppose it's probably about 1983, maybe 1984. Don't quite remember, but I grew up in very rural Maine. I made a trip to a town that was large enough to have a record shop, and I'd asked the gentleman at the record shop for a Clash album, and he didn't have anything on hand, and he handed me Absolutely and said, there you go, this is just like the Clash. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but nonetheless, that's what I went home with. And I've pretty much been a fan ever since. I didn't hear or see much from Madness until Our House came on MTV. And at about that point, I was pretty much sold. I was a fan for life from then on.
Well, cool. So you mentioned the Our House video on MTV, and actually that was my first introduction to Madness was MTV. I mean, I was a child of the MTV generation. And Our House, of course, was the big video that was on rotation at MTV, like 82, 83, right? Same time frame as you. There were two other videos I think they had in rotation, One Step Beyond and House of Fun. Those were like the three videos that they always showed on MTV. And then I never heard anything of them after that, right? I mean, they only had really in the United States, which is where we're based, they really only had one hit, and that was Our House. And so I just assumed they broke up, right? You never hear from this band again, one hit wonder in the States. And, you know, it wasn't until, about 98 or 99. Do you remember those record clubs, BMG, Columbia House, all of those?
I remember them well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so, you know, I had to get one of my, you get your 10 records as your enrollment selection or whatever. And actually, okay, it was CDs. It was 98. And I happened to notice that there was Total Madness. I think it was Total Madness. It was the American compilation CD with all of the big colorful circles on it.
Let me see. I think I found the one that ended up having the pool cue billiard theme greatest hits. I think is probably the first one I got of theirs. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I forget the name of that particular one.
Yeah, I forget too. As soon as we log off, I'm going to think of it. But anyhow, so I got this CD, and I knew two of the songs on it, right? I knew One Step Beyond, and I knew Our House. I was disappointed that House of Fun wasn't on it, but I listened to some of the other stuff, and I'm like, wow, there's some really, really good stuff here. Why didn't we hear this over here? Of course, I still had assumed that they had broken up, because I think the latest thing on there was, I don't know, like maybe 85, 86. So I still assumed that they weren't together. Right. And I don't remember what brought it about. I was just doing a Facebook search, and I happened across the Suggs and Madness Appreciation page on Facebook. And I started digging a little bit further, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are still together. They're still recording. What the heck, right? So I kind of fell down the Madness rabbit hole at that point. I ended up joining, there's a Facebook group based out of the UK called Mad Chat, where I really met a lot of other fans, got to really get familiar with the music. And actually at one point, Mad Chat ended up making me one of their administrators. I was an administrator on Mad Chat for a few years. Shout out to the Mad Chat team, Brian, Steve, Robert. How are you guys? So it's weird. I really came to Madness very late.
I say for the most part, I kind of did too. So far as getting really, really, really deeply into the band, I always had Madness records, always bought Magnus CDs when I saw them around, and did listen to them. But about the time Liberty of Norton Folgate came out is when I realized that they were still a band and still happening. And even that caught me by surprise. I just happened to be reading in a music magazine, heard about it, thought it was interesting, a sort of concept album by
Yeah.
a band that had been some, decades in the past. I really thought it would be a sort of doomed project, but I said, I don't care. I'm going to find it and I'm going to listen to it. And I absolutely fell right back in love with the band at that point. And since then, I've not lost track of them or what they've been doing, and have stayed pretty much in tune with everything that's going on with them. And I think that's a credit to them because Liberty of Norton Folgate really did. To me, it's. I thought it was everything that the band aspired to be. Witty, clever, melodic, and great storytelling. So I really thought it was fantastic.
I love that
But
album
maybe
too.
that's for another podcast.
Yes. Oh, we're going to have to devote one podcast just to Norton Folgate, I think, because that's such an amazing, amazing album. But that kind of brings us to, the idea of being American fans. We really don't get the information. We don't get the attention, I guess, that fans in the UK get, right? I mean, like I said, I thought they'd broken up just because I hadn't heard anything from them. So one of the things that we have done here in setting up Stateside Madness is to kind of connect with other American fans and to kind of keep this information flowing, right?
Absolutely. Stateside Madness is a project that's just a little over a year old. And there were people in the Madness community in the UK that when there was talk of a tour happening, they felt that it'd be a good idea to have an American fan club, essentially. And they reached out to me and asked if it was something that I'd be interested in. And I was blown away. Of course, I said yes. And here we are. We've got 5 members working on it pretty well. And many, many more people have joined our Facebook group. And so the podcast is going to be a nice addition to that. And essentially our mission is to do pretty much what you just said, a place and resources for people to really connect with the band and hopefully connect with each other and stay very, very excited about the upcoming tour. And we hope that people appreciate this podcast as a part of that.
And so as far as what we plan to do for this podcast, I know, Polly, you and I have talked about this, but just to kind of let our listeners know. So we're coming at this from a specifically American perspective. As American fans, there are things I think maybe we perceive a little bit differently. Sometimes it can be like in the lyrics of their music or, things that come across a little bit differently, things, we're looking at it specifically from that perspective. Some weeks, such as this week, we'll do an album review where Polly, you and I can do this deep dive into the album tracks. Other weeks, I'm hoping we can devote an episode to one specific member of the band. Like maybe one day we would do, a day for Tomo, and one day we would do a day for Betters. You mentioned the American tour that's coming up. We do hope to have some exclusive content, especially as we get closer to the American tour dates. Polly, do you know what the American tour dates are? I know they were rescheduled.
In fact, I do. So it starts on May 26th in NYC and moves on to Boston, May 28th. It'll be at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles on May 30th. And then they move up to Oakland for 2 dates on June 2nd and June 3rd. Somewhere in there is the Punk Rock Bowling Festival.
Oh,
I believe would that be the 31st?
I think so. That's Memorial Day weekend.
So actually, I'm going to be at every show except for Las Vegas.
Oh, wow. That's the one that I'm hoping to go to.
And well, that's good because Stateside Madness is going to be hosting pre-show get-togethers.
Woohoo!
And I'll be hosting many of them. And I think maybe you should host the Las Vegas one then,
Well,
if that's where you're going to be.
Well, for me, I have to travel. That's a very, very long trip for me. Now, I made the trip last year to go see Duran Duran in Las Vegas, who I'd never seen. And certainly, if I'm going to travel to see a band, it would be Madness. So I'm hoping, with the COVID-19, I hope it's a thing of the past by then. I'm hoping that I'll be able to travel. I'm hoping I'll be able to go. So keep your fingers crossed, because I have never seen Madness live. I have never seen them live. They last played in my city in 1983.
So I managed to see them in the UK. I saw them in Cardiff on the Sound of Madness tour, which was fantastic. And I did that based on the idea that I assumed they were never going to play the United States again. So, but I'm not disappointed. I'm happy to have gone there and happy that they're going to be in the US.
All right. So a little background for some of our newer fans who might not know about the band. So Madness are a British ska pop band founded in 1979 in Camden Town, London. They're best known in America for their 1982 single, Our House. The band members. So we have Graham Suggs McPherson on vocals, Lee Thompson on saxophone, Chris Foreman on guitar, Mike Barson on keyboards, Mark Bedford on bass. He's got a birthday coming up, Polly, in 2 days, I think.
Yes, I do believe so. You be the resident keeper of the birthdays. I'll trust what you say.
Okay, all right. And then we have Daniel Woody Woodgate on drums. And until fairly recently, we had, I can never say the name correctly, Carl. He goes by Carl. Cathal. That's Carl. Cathal, right?
I do.
Cathal Smith.
I've always said Cathal. Maybe
Okay.
That's me trying to inflect some English tone into that, but I don't really know.
All right. Well, Carl Smith. He also goes by
Chaz.
Chaz Smash. So He was on vocals and MC. Unfortunately, he's no longer with the band, but we're still hopeful that maybe one day he might return.
Yes, it's a subject that I don't know too many people know the real details of. I always felt, the way I heard explained, he left on good terms and not a lot of the way of hard feelings, but nobody seems to speak much of whether he has plans to return or not. And I also want to add maybe that he provided trumpet along the way too.
Oh yeah, you're correct. He did eventually learn an instrument, right? When he started off, he was just kind of their Bez, right? If you're familiar with the Happy Mondays, he was kind of their dancer and their hype man. But then he gradually started contributing and contributing songwriting and singing and as you mentioned, learned the trumpet.
I believe that's the story. Yeah.
All right. So Polly, you want to tell us a little bit about Work, Rest, and Play, the EP that we're going to review today?
So I know a bit, familiar with it. It was a release this year for Record Store Day. I believe that was only in the UK. However, this original release was in March of 1980 on Stiff Records, the original label that Madness was on. It's a 4-track EP. It was produced by Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley, who also produced One Step Beyond. And so this was released shortly after One Step Beyond. And I do believe it was an attempt to just reach a slightly wider audience. And I believe also motivated a little bit by having it be eligible for the UK singles chart. and which it actually did very well on the UK singles chart. I do believe that the entire EP was listed as a single. I do believe it reached number 6, and it was a success for them. It really got the notice and attention of people, and it was pretty profound building block in establishing Madness as a band and getting them that notoriety in England, which of course paved the way for everything else. So, and back a little bit to Clive Langer and Alan Winsley, they would have a relationship with Madness for some time and produced, I guess, very nearly everything except for Danger Men. And they would also go on to produce a few other notable acts like Morrissey and Dexy's Midnight Runners. So that is what I know about Work, Rest, and Play.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that they produced Turai A, the Dexy's Midnight Runners album, which is actually one of my favorite albums. I love that album. So they're an amazing, amazing production duo. I think we should listen to the album. What do you think?
I think that would be great.
Wow.
Probably one of my all-time favorite Madness songs. I think it's possibly the best example of the early stages, the early years of Madness. It really kind of encapsulates the vibe of these guys from Camden, the nutty sound, the sort of, rascally, no good doer sort of street kid vibe. While the content of the song isn't necessarily about that, the sound, I think, totally is. And it's just a fantastic song. It is still one of their featured live songs. It's a fantastic sight to see a floor of an arena with people bouncing up and down, adorned with fezzes and all in unison to Nightboat. It is just a fantastic sea of red hats. It is by far a fan favorite of every concert. And to my knowledge, I think they do play it still at every show.
Yeah, 40 years later, and that's still a staple of their live show. I think they usually end with it, don't they?
I've seen the time I was lucky enough to see Madness. I do believe it came at the end of the set, one of the last 3 songs. And
how about the video? What did you think of the video for that song? That's to me, that's one of the most memorable associations.
I think they got lucky. They scrambled to put that video together, and it lacks in production value, but it was of the era. It's not uncommon for a lot of bands to really pump out a video. Because they there was very little lag time between recording albums and putting albums out back in those days too. So everything was quite hastily done sometimes, and they certainly did it with that video. I actually haven't watched it in a few years, but what I remember most about it, of course, is the bouncing ball lyrics and how that seemed like a real throwback even in the early 80s to like 50s and 60s kids television. I thought that was pretty endearing. And the other thing, I guess, would be pith helmets. Well, what a curious choice that is. Fits with the song, but not something I suppose you'd, of course, see many people do. But yeah, fantastic video. Funny, you know, silly, tongue-in-cheek, everything that the band excels at.
I think part of the video's charm is it's just so laughably low budget. I mean, the green screen is terrible. I think at one point you can actually see the pyramid background through one of the shadows or something. But that's its charm, right? And it's the guys just being the guys. And you can really get their personality. But I think I read somewhere that they were really heavily drinking during that set. And you can kind of tell as you're watching that video because they're getting a little bit more and more drunk as the video goes on. And at the very end... I mean, there's somebody's dog runs through the set and all kinds of just weird random stuff. But at the very end, there's like betters just crawling on his belly. And I think he is just so completely drunk. I mean, he was just, you know, in his late teens at that point, I think. But he was clearly very, very drunk. I think it's charming. I love the video. There's one thing that bothers me about this song, Polly.
Name it. Go ahead.
Okay. So the lyrics, right? You're dealing with an oarsman, right? The lyrics are about the oarsman rowing down the Nile. But then at the very beginning, the two notes of the saxophone, that's supposed to sound like a steamship. Why is there an oarsman on a steamship? Am I overthinking this?
You might be. You might be. Yeah, I suppose the argument could be made that at that time, even at night, there's a few different vessels on the Nile. So maybe it's not the actual punt. Maybe that the oarsman is on. Maybe it's an adjacent ship. Does that make you feel better?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Okay, thank you. You've put my mind at ease.
Good.
All right. Do you want to introduce the next track?
Okay, fair enough. So track 2 on the EP would be Deceives the Eye. And I like this song, a fair amount of mischief going on with it. So let's hear a little bit of it.
In the earliest days of my shoplifting career, you could safely say I was filled with fear. It was nail-biting work from the very start, but several quick successes soon gave me heart. After a while I could pick any reviews, some shirts, some trousers and a few LPs. No one ever stopped me, they didn't seem to care. It sometimes seemed to me there was no one there. Then a fine summer's day, my mate and me set off down the West End on our usual spree. Things were as normal for an hour or so, then my nimble hands were a bit too slow. 2 store detectives made a fast approach. One grabbed my jacket, the other grabbed my throat. So we took you at last, one said with joy, that after you some time my life in the boy.
Wow. Deceives the Eye. I got to tell you, I really, really like this song. The first thing that you notice, or at least the first thing I noticed, is Betters' walking bass line. And that's very characteristic of Jamaican ska music. And if you know anything about the band, they're very heavily influenced by ska. So they've got that walking bass line. But I also think that this song, the opening line, to me, it's the most brilliant opening line ever in a song in the earliest days of my shoplifting career. I don't know what it is about that line. It's so completely unexpected and it works. And if you know anything about the band, if you've, for example, maybe if you've read very recently, they came out with an oral history called Before We Was We. And Mike Barson, who's the keyboardist, was writing in the book, shoplifting was something that me and Lee and Chris all did. A lot of shoplifting. I guess there was a feeling like nobody's getting hurt, you know? I had trouble with it at one point. And then he goes on to say that he had something like 300 records, but he never bought a record in his life because he had always shoplifted them from record stores. And it wasn't just Barso. Chris and Tomo actually, I think, was probably the big thief of the group back in the day. And he actually spent some time in a juvenile reform school called Stamford House. And that was actually the subject of another song, which we're going to talk about next podcast when we talk about the One Step Beyond album. So what do you think, Polly?
Okay, so what do I think? What I like about Deceives the Eye is something that I appreciate about Madness altogether, is their ability to tell the story of where they grow up, where what life was like in the 70s and early 80s in the UK, about the economic depression, about working class people and things like that. But they don't have to be direct or overly literal about it. It's more about the sort of painting a picture and having a running theme through a lot of their work that kind of describes that, and sort of sets the stage, paints a picture, gives you an idea of even somebody like me from a very, very different background from what they were experiencing. It gave you a sense that you had a little bit of an understanding of what life was like in England at that time. And it was profound, and it's what most of the entire punk movement is based off of, is that the economic inequality, treatment of people. And I really feel that songs like this are a reflection of that. And it resonates today, of course. I mean, these are things we still continue to talk about. And yeah, I love that. It's a fantastic thing. They're much like the Kinks in that way, really building on a theme of English life. And I really, really appreciate that.
And it seems like it would be such a depressing subject, right? You're talking about, the economy and Thatcherism and all that kind of stuff. But it's a happy, bouncy song, and the way they're presenting it is just very matter of fact, like, hey, this is us. This is how we were.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be about escapism a little bit. The whole point is that the youth in that place in that time needed something fun to do, and that's how the ska movement or ska revival movement got started. Club scenes, watch Dance Craze if you need to learn anything else about it.
Okay, so now if you were listening to this on the original vinyl, and for you kids out there, back in the day, we had these big vinyl records, right, that you had to play one side, and when the side ended, you had to flip it over to play the other side. So we're going to flip it to side 2, and we're going to listen to The Young and the Old.
Staggering home, everybody sings all the old songs, the Cockney routines, all the old women, all the young men. Try changing places, then back again. Old man in the morning, young men at night. Breakfast full of wisdom until you hit the light. Knock back the drinks, hitch up your skirt.
So The Young and the Old, a very endearing song, I feel, and something that would be a recurring theme in much of Madness's music. And this is really, to me, just a standard drinking song. And I find that pretty charming and pretty relatable, the concept that you might be tired, worn down, but by the time you start hanging out with your friends, throwing a few back, getting into a little bit of mischief, you start to feel a little bit young again. And it's certainly reflected in the lyrics and certainly reflected in the tempo of the song. And altogether, I think a fantastic early song for Madness.
It's all eggs, bacon, beans, and a fried slice.
The next song, the final song on the EP, Don't Quote Me on That.
Did you hear the one? Yeah. The one they wrote in the paper just the other day. Well, would you believe it? What I said, they took it all the wrong way. Now you gotta be careful about what you say, cause they've got a bad habit. Will you read in between the lines? Or is that what I said? No, I just can't remember. They seem to have a very good memory though. But as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to be black, white, Chinese, or anything really. Just enjoy. Shut up, listen, and dance. It's all eggs, bacon, beans, and a fried slice. Don't quote me on that. Please don't quote me.
Don't quote me on that.
That's fine.
Don't quote me on that. The first thing I associate with this song, and I imagine this is probably true for you too, is the beginning of the film, the Madness film, Madness Take It or Leave It. Have you seen that?
Right. I have. It's been some time, but I remember it.
Yeah, because this is the very first song that's playing in the opening credits. So right away, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I hear it. But the lyrics on this are really interesting. So this was written by Chaz Smash. And this relates to an incident that happened in '79. So the band was being interviewed for the magazine NME, New Musical Express. And at the time, there was the National Front and the British Movement. There were two organizations. They're very heavily kind of white power, skinhead type movements. And more of the members of these two groups were showing up at Madness shows. They really were starting to have like almost an alarming number of skinheads, racist skinheads at their shows. And so the reporter for NME was asking about this. And, you know, the band, they were still kind of new to the whole press thing and maybe a little naive. And Chaz had told the reporter of NME, it's got nothing to do with us. We don't care if people are in the NF or the BM, so long as they're behaving themselves, having a good time and not fighting. What does it matter? Who cares what their political views are? And the reporter just kind of kept pressing him. And it really kind of got very confrontational. And later when this came out in the press, his comments were really kind of taken out of context and misconstrued as, you know, almost like Madness are supporting this white power movement, which they weren't. The line eggs, bacon, and beans and a fried slice, that was actually from the same interview because Tomo, Lee Thompson, the saxophonist, he's also kind of the cut up, right? And he's kind of the tension breaker of the group. And whenever they asked him a question, he would answer with something completely random, like eggs and bacon and sausages with tomato sauce, please. Or how do you like your eggs? So that's where that came from in the song. That's that whole eggs, bacons, beans, and a fried slice, which I guess is a traditional British breakfast. So I hear. I think that sounds like really unpleasant for a breakfast. I mean, I would rather just have a croissant or something. You know, I mean, beans for breakfast, really? But I guess that's a thing. So don't mean to be ripping on the British. Just a little peculiar to my American tastes. And then the last thing I want to mention about this is the writing credit on this. Now, I did a little bit of digging and I couldn't really find much. So if you look on the LP, the song is credited to Peter Tosh and Chaz Smash. And Peter Tosh, as you know, Poly was one of the Wailers, right? Reggae artist. And at the very end of the song,
That's
which
right.
we didn't, at the very end of the song, which we didn't get to hear, unfortunately, Chaz says, "I'd like to say thank you to Peter Tosh." So, but I couldn't really find out what was his involvement with this song. Did he actually co-write it? Was it like, were they sampling some of his music? Like, I know you mentioned the Clash earlier. I know the Clash got a writing credit for the Garbage song "Stupid Girl" because they sampled the drum beat, right? So I don't know. Maybe somebody, Polly, maybe you know, or maybe some of our listeners might know a little bit more, and maybe they can hit us up on Stateside Madness and let me know. I really am curious to know what Peter Tosh's involvement was on this song.
Yeah, I never learned that, and I don't know that I ever read the liner notes or anything on it to know or even understand that they had given Peter Tosh credit. And so I don't have an extensive catalog of Peter Tosh's music, but I don't even recognize a similarity in any of the music. So I don't know that it's a case of whether he took the song, reformulated it. It's kind of pre-sampling, so I don't believe it would have been that either. No, I'd be curious to find out if anybody knows.
Yeah. Hey, so Chaz, if you're listening, come on for an interview for Stateside Madness and tell us about Peter Tosh.
Please do. We'd love to have you.
Yeah. All right. So that's the end of the Work, Rest, or Play EP, 4 whopping songs. Hey, Polly, what was your favorite song on this EP? I'm just curious.
Sure. So without waffling a bit, it's going to be Night Boat to Cairo. I am not the type of person that always goes for the obvious and most famous selection, but it's to me clearly the most solid song, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Night Boat is my favorite song, and I think most Madness fans, I think, would probably agree with that. Although I do have a special place in my heart for "Don't Quote Me on That," just because it's so nutty. You know, I like that. It makes me happy. So speaking of Night Boat to Cairo, I promised you a little surprise, Polly, and you didn't know what it was, right?
Oh,
did you figure?
Okay, I'm surprised.
All right.
No, I haven't figured it out.
Okay. Well, I did a little bit of digging, and so it turns out there is a band in Israel in the 80s, and the name of the band is called Machina, and they did a song. Now, I do not speak Hebrew. I'm going to slaughter this, and I apologize in advance. Rakavet Leila Lekahir. Totally slaughtered that. But it's Hebrew for night train to Cairo.
You convinced me.
Okay, I've convinced one person. But yeah, to any of our fans out there who speak Hebrew, I'm so sorry. But anyway, so it's a song called Night Train to Cairo. It's inspired by Night Boat to Cairo. And so this was on their first album, which was in '85. And Machina actually are kind of a big deal in Israel. So would you like to listen to Night Train to Cairo by Machina, Polly?
I think we should.
I think we should too. So here we go.
כל כך עצוב לי ושמש עליי ודיזינגוף נראה לי כמו רכבת לילה לקהיר בין כל הצלילים מחפש סימן יושב בצד הדרך יושב ליד הזמן מגיע מלמטה רחוק מהכיכר
What'd you think? Our first episode
So
is in
far,
the
so
can.
good.
Yeah. This is fun.
It is. I am happy to do it. I'm a novice to podcasting. In fact, I don't know anything of podcasting aside from that Mark Maron television show. So it's all new to me, but I liked it.
Well, and this is new to me too. This is actually my first podcast. I went out and bought a microphone specifically for this. So you will see how the production values are once I get through and edit it. So all our listeners out there, please be a little bit patient. So we're hoping to make this a regular thing. We're going to do another episode. And our next episode, we've decided we're going to do a deep dive into their debut album, One Step Beyond.
I am looking forward to it.
Me too. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. Please check us out on Stateside Madness. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. And I think we own statesidemadness.com, don't we?
In fact, we do. And it's a fantastic blog by our friend Donald Trull. And he is quite the authoritarian on madness. He knows much, much more than me. And I think you'll find his articles interesting.
Oh, I love his articles. And also I want to give a shout out to Donald because he created our artwork that accompanies this podcast. So thank you so much, Donald, for putting that together on such quick notice. Looks fabulous.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, I guess, Polly, I'll see you virtually speaking in 2 weeks. And everybody else, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Good night.